past couple years, brought on by a healthy combination of nostalgia and retail therapy, collecting CDs became a sort of hobby of mine, I guess you could say. And that got me thinking back to the first CDs I ever owned as a kid. So, I asked around to some of my friends to see what their first CDs were, to give mine a better perspective.
First CD I ever bought? Probably Lil Romeo's self-titled album.
The first CD I ever bought was Misfits Collection 1.
It was a Christmas-themed album, and that Christmas-themed album was called Christmas Farts.
I remember specifically going to an FYE to get Old Dirty Bastards Return to the 36 Chambers, the dirty versions.
The first CD I ever owned was the Black Eyed Peas Elefunk.
The first CD I ever bought was the Leitz World Click.
It's pretty self-explanatory. It's a novelty Christmas album where all the songs are made out of fart noises. What fun it is to ride and sing a sleighing fart tonight, you know, shit like that.
The first CD I remember buying was Bleed American by Jimmy Eat World.
Linkin Park Hybrid Theory. New metal and hip-hop together at last.
And that same day, I also got Let Go by Avril Lavigne.
Literally have looked this up.
Band was back. The album was Mutations.
And I can't fucking find it.
I don't remember any of the songs on it, but I do remember that it was like a very magical moment for me because I had a CD.
My mom handing me down this Def Leppard album and this Van Halen album when I was 8 is a pretty good explanation of why I am the way that I am.
I get what you're thinking. I think I found it. Is it this one with the real life Santa Claus on it? No.
The first album I ever owned myself was a gift from my father, and it was Be Not Nobody by Vanessa Carlton, which is the one with 1,000 miles on it.
He was the biggest rapper in the late 2000s. For an edgy white girl to like, that's gonna be Eminem. So I got it. Curtain Call.
My first CD is Aquarius by Aqua. Not kidding.
I feel it's important to put into context that I was 9 years old and I was too young to have an iTunes account, so I had very basic It was Now That's What I Call Music.
The cover was a CGI Santa Claus. His cheeks were like big and swollen. It was kind of grotesque.
Well shit, I was hoping their examples are gonna make mine feel less silly. Oh well. The first CDs I ever got were for Christmas of 1995, and they were the various artist compilations. ESPN and Tommy Boy Records present Jock Rock.
Jock Rock!
And minutes later, Jock Jams.
ESPN and Tommy Boy present Jock Jams.
Now when I think Tommy Boy Records, I think of their historical list of legendary old-school hip-hop signees and screwing De La Soul out of royalties. Not 60s and 70s classic rock, but with their first collaboration with ESPN, that's exactly what a majority of jock rock is, with songs from Queen, BTO, and Steppenwolf. It's a collection of songs you'd likely hear over the speakers at a sporting event, with a layer of pumped-in crowd noise working as transitions between tracks, as well as in the background of a number of songs attempting to make it feel like you're really there at a football or baseball game, which Lord knows is the closest I'd ever get to either one. And to round out jock rock, we get the Sports Center theme. Why not? Jock Jams, on the other hand, was more hip-hop and Eurodance-centric, with tracks from CNC Music Factory, 2 Unlimited, and the 69 Boys. I'm not sure why both CDs needed Gary Glitter's Rock and Roll Part 2, but they decided it should close out Jock Jams, so maybe they just had no idea how to end these pointless albums after all. While Jock Rock had short interludes of audience chanting and assorted organ riffs, Jock Jams had clips of cheerleading routines. So yeah, to say the least, it's a bit of a mystery why these would be my first CDs I'd ever own. I'm certain it's not a shocker to learn that I really wasn't into sports as a kid. Yeah, I watched wrestling religiously, but only casually followed football and hockey, and half-heartedly participated on soccer and softball teams for 1 season each, just to hang out with other kids from school, and it wasn't worth it. Why did I ask for these 2 CDs for Christmas? Did I ask for these? I honestly don't remember, and neither do my parents. It's just like the year I mysteriously got Emmitt Smith and Brett Favre jerseys. I genuinely have no idea where they came from. Did I intercept another kid's gifts? Apparently not, as I ended up owning the first 4 Jock Jams and all 3 Jock Rock. No more jerseys, though. So while it may have seemed pretty random at first, it makes a lot more sense if you knew me at that age. I was 8 years old, and I wouldn't develop a music identity for a while, so most of my initial musical interests were influenced by my parents. Most of my first CDs were compilations and soundtracks, focusing on the 70s and 80s, as it wasn't too far off from what my parents were listening to in the first place, both being born in the early 60s. And as weird as it sounds, Jock Jams was my first experience with rap and dance pop music, and it was on Jock Rock that I heard the Ramones for the first time. And even after all these years, I've come to realize that compilation albums have helped shape my musical taste for most of my life, and that's why I wanted to make this video. To bring you through the history of compilation albums through my eyes and life experiences, showing my appreciation for the medium, and once and for all, putting an end to the gatekeepy elitist mindset that there are right and wrong ways to get into music. Some of the examples of compilations I'm going to present throughout the video might seem a little abstract at times, but they'll all make sense by the end. Maybe. If you watch our series Riff Break, you'll see how excited I get when a commercial for a TV record offer pops up. These are albums that you couldn't find in stores and you had to order over the phone. Besides all the music, these commercials would stand out by being longer than your average commercial, by being 1 or even sometimes 2 minutes long. As a kid in the 90s, hearing a lot of these songs for the first time and seeing the commercials so often, they would forge lifelong memories. I loved compilations so much as a kid, I made a bunch myself on these cassette tapes. Still got them to this day. And they're all just made up of songs I found on my parents' CDs and tapes, and some tapes I already had. And what's funny is, I know the whole point of compilations is that you have all the songs you like in one convenient place. Despite that, I don't remember listening to these much. I think most of the fun was just making them. There was even a class project in like 6th or 7th grade where we had to come together in groups, pick a product, and film a commercial for it to show the rest of the class, and naturally, my group did a compilation CD. Surprisingly, nobody fought me on that idea. So I made the mixtape, printed out all the songs on a piece of paper, rigged up a roller system so the songs could actually scroll in front of the camera as the songs played in the background. It was dope, and I wish I had the tape to show, but I don't. And that sucks, because I would love to see that footage again. As for the history of compilation albums, it unsurprisingly dates back to before my time with k-tel, a company based out of Winnipeg, you idiot! Specializing in all sorts of kitschy gizmos, k-tel made a name for themselves by flooding the market with useless garbage that sold amazingly well. Probably.
Scientifically developed, the incredible chromostone senses thermal changes deep within your body, reflects all your mood changes in a fascinating kaleidoscope of color.
Place the bottle on the Easy Way holder and rotate the etched line over the candle until heated. Rub an ice cube around the etched line. Your cut is now complete.
Bigfoot, you're fun!
Bigfoot from k-tel.
Beats too big.
By the late 60s, k-tel broke into the record business by selling compilations without asking for permission to use songs currently owned by major record labels. Despite this being illegal, the company soon came to a compromise, with k-tel selling like gangbusters, often topping Billboard charts, which started to rub mainstream labels the wrong way. Sure, these k-tel releases would often cut songs off early and sometimes omit entire verses to fit more songs on an album, but I doubt the buyers minded. These albums were perfect for music lovers on a budget, say maybe a child saving up their allowance, who wanted a collection of 20 to 40 of their favorite songs instead of having to buy a ton of records for only 1 or 2 songs each. k-tel further upset record labels by recording new versions of songs as to get around paying royalties. The major labels retaliated by selling pre-made compilations for k-tel to distribute and licensed less and less songs for k-tel to use. And after going public and diversifying into the movie, wine, gas, oil, and real estate markets, they eventually went bankrupt in the mid-80s. But their influence on the history of music and how people came to get their music would be felt for generations to come. Besides bringing the concept of the compilation album to the masses, k-tel is relevant to my particular story for one of their many novelty releases, Goofy Greats, an album that I was obsessed with.
I like the next two, but I don't want to dance to them. I'm gonna wait to do the Rock and Robin and Alley-oop, because I really like them. I even sing to them when in my sleep.
This album was a collection of mostly songs from the 60s, when there was no shortage of this kind of stuff. Some of the songs are undeniably goofy, like Snoopy vs. the Red Baron, Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini, or Ray Stevens' regrettable Ahab the Arab, but to imply that tracks like Rockin' Robin and Little Green Bag are on the same level of goofiness is ridiculous! To exemplify the inconsistent goofy levels, I present this quick edit.
Let me tell you about Ahab, the Arab, the chic of the burning sands.
My dad recorded most of the album on one side of a cassette with a recently released Monkeys compilation on the other side. I listened to this compilation a bunch too, but I'm also super nostalgic for the commercial because it's on a VHS my dad recorded of MTV in the mid-80s that I watched religiously and featured in an old episode of Riff Break. Another commercial on that same VHS was for Fun Rock by Heartland Music, a staple of late 80s, early 90s TV. It had a good bit of the same songs as Goofy Greats. I mean, recycling is pretty common with this genre, but what makes this commercial stand out in my memory is all the amazingly cheesy acting for each song, and they'd run the same play for other releases as well. Back to the 50s, Unforgettable 50s, Wacky Favorites, the 40s collection, Stage Door Canteen, Feel Good Rock, and Real Rock all featured a large cast of, hopefully, paid actors lip-syncing the songs. But how did they pick who sang which song? I mean, a waitress singing Bread and Butter? Sure. But why is a doctor singing Monster Mash and Hang On Sloopy? Why is this guy screaming the lyrics of Joy to the World at this much younger woman just vibing her way through this traumatic experience? And why are so many shots filmed in restaurants and grocery stores? Did they even have permission to film these?
We don't have a permit. Run!
But Heartland Music wasn't just cheap, rehashed novelty tapes. They were likely better known for their cheaper greatest hits compilations. And don't worry, the commercials for these albums had their own creepy trademark. You could always tell these Heartland Music commercials right away from the narrator's voice and the flat shots of the artists singing their songs in this weird gray room with plants in the background. I don't know how I would look it up, but it feels like these had to have been parodied on Adult Swim at least once.
He's had more #1 hits than anyone in country music history. She's won 4 Grammys. His voice is loved around the world. She's truly a country music legend.
I'm sure this is a comparison only I would make, but it feels like mid-2000s WWE, where they filmed a whole bunch of dudes Titantron videos in the same church or cathedral. It feels like they flew everyone out and filmed them all in a weekend. I love the idea of Alabama, Randy Travis, and Conway Twitty all sitting in a green room as Boxcar Willie takes hours to film his spot. Not to be outdone, Sessions Records, focusing more on the k-tel style various artist compilations, had their own tropes for their commercials as well. Their ads usually revolved around one person telling a friend about this great new album they heard about on TV, which doesn't make sense if you think about it for more than a second. Or they would be talking directly to the viewer through the magic of television before finally realizing that words could never accurately describe how fire the album was, telling you to just listen for yourself.
Sessions brings back all those great memories with a new 4-record album called Senior Prom. Just listen.
Just listen.
Just listen. Just listen.
Just listen.
Just listen.
Just listen.
All right.
Just
listen. Please splash, I was taking a bath.
We didn't have Disney Channel or Cartoon Network in the house when I was growing up, so I was strictly a Nickelodeon kid. A lot of the programs were weird and random, but a lot of the stuff they showed during the commercial breaks didn't make much sense either. Picture yourself 7 or 8 years old watching Nicktoons on a summer afternoon, and between the commercials for cereal and board games, you're hit with...
Imagine a world where time drifts slowly.
Aw yeah, Pure Moods was part of so many of our childhoods that it lives on all these years later in our collective memory. Whenever I see a corny-ass millennial starter pack meme, Pure Moods is always in there. But the album does have the theme to Twin Peaks, so maybe they were onto something. These songs fit into one of 2 categories: synth new age, and themes to TV shows and movies parents probably wouldn't want their kids watching. I mean, sure, Tubular Bells is a fairly chilled out song, but have you ever seen The Exorcist?
Oh, Mom, can't we get a horse? Well, no, we're in Washington, honey. I know.
Terrifying. I don't have that much more to say about Pure Moods that hasn't been said already. It feels like Saturday Night Live is 2 weeks away from doing a skit parodying Pure Moods if they haven't already. But if you actually want to laugh, The Obscure made a video about it back in 2012. Even after all this time, I'm still marveling at how incredibly off the mark this commercial airing on Nickelodeon was. While so many commercials at the time were loud, super colorful, and in your face, Pure Moods felt like a networking strategy to cool us back down, like an episode of JJ the Jet Plane. If it was, it didn't work. But I consider it an admirable hypothetical attempt. Slightly more obscure, but just as memorable for me, was Cool Rock, with the CD chilling on a steamy block of ice. A stark contrast to another Mystic Music compilation, Red Hot, with this awful album cover. Not the worst I've seen, but it's close.
Come on, crank it up for this new 33-song collection of hard rockin' hits.
Cool Rock was a compilation of songs you'd hear at the grocery store or on a crusty, dusty adult contemporary radio station, but the commercial put band names to the songs, so it was sort of educational for me in that way. How else would I learn that open parentheses, I just close parentheses, died in your arms was by Cutting Crew? A fact I still remember to this day, but has unfortunately popped up on absolutely zero tests in my life. Thanks a million, Cool Rock. How was this supposed to help with my college placement? Between John Waite sternly talking at the camera and Wilson Phillips singing on the beach, I became as familiar with these music videos as I was with episodes of Rugrats, and I've never seen these music videos in full. I cannot stress enough how crucial these commercials were in my pre-internet world. There was no other way to find out who did songs I liked besides asking my parents, but that could get annoying. That's why Shazam is so useful today. You hear someone listening to something cool, but you're too frozen with social anxiety to bring yourself to ask them what it is? Shazam that shit! It's commercials like Cool Rock that made me way more aware of music that came out before I was born than the other kids at school, which didn't make me any more popular. What the fuck, Cool Rock? Batting 1,000! While the other kids at school were already listening to pop and R&B acts on the radio and MTV, I was listening to Time Life's Sounds of the 80s. I was rocking out to Starships We Built This City so much that I was genuinely shocked when I started hearing it being called the worst song of all time decades later. 80s music is my go-to comfort music because it's so nostalgic for me, and it's because of commercials like Cool Rock and Sounds of the 80s. While most TV record offers were singular albums, Time Life worked a bit differently. You would order the first CD in a series or get it free when subscribing to Time Magazine, then they would send you another entry in the series every month. But I guess the albums got pricier after that because I only had the first two before my parents cut that shit off with the quickness. Same story with those CD record clubs like Columbia House and BMG. They'd reel you in with a dozen of CDs for a penny deal and assume you'd stick around and pay for each selection of the month going forward. But my parents canceled and resubscribed so often that most of their CDs came from these record clubs and it barely cost them anything. It sounds like a low-risk means of building a collection, but I only just recently learned that CDs from these clubs were printed in-house and were usually of an inferior quality than the ones you'd get from the store. Not exactly like most people noticed, but I'm starting to get k-tel flashbacks, so we're gonna move on. Or more accurately, backwards. Going back to the very beginning, like the Goofy Greats and Monkees records, my dad also transferred all his Beatle records to cassette in the room next to mine, and hearing them are some of my earliest memories. These records would include the Grammy Award-winning Chipmunks Sing the Beatles, and don't let the inclusion of that tidbit be mistaken for praise from me. It's a blatant cash grab, released at the height of Beatlemania in 1964. But I have a photo of me as a baby with the album, so I felt obligated to include it. The Beatles are one of my dad's favorite bands, so naturally I ended up listening to them a lot as well, and they would be the first band I knew I liked, and I knew a lot of the songs by heart. It's funny that despite this, very little of my music taste ended up being British invasion bands, or 60s music at all for that matter, for quite a while. Though we did eventually order a copy of Spirit of the 60s with the central casting hippies on the cover after seeing the depressing commercial during Nick at Night, which fit right in as it's basically the soundtrack to the Wonder Years.
Anybody here seen my old friend John? I said war! Good God, y'all!
And while the 60s didn't have as big of an impact on me as the 80s had, the Chipmunks would play a much bigger role in the years to come. They once again became part of my consciousness once they started showing the Chipmunks cartoon on Nickelodeon. Jesus fuck, no way, not the Alvin Show. I meant the other one, like the one from the 80s. The Alvin Show is like Wienerville. It's on in the middle of the day and you're too lazy to change the channel, so you just leave it on, but God knows you're not watching it. Still, I knew I wanted the Chipmunks' 35th birthday party album the second I saw the commercial for the first time. And considering how many times I listened to this tape back in the day, it's a wonder it still plays at all. Oh yeah. Yeah. This is my shit! As hard as it may be to believe, this collection of covers introduced me to popular 80s hits I'd never heard before. As much 80s music as I listened to, it was mostly limited to rock with very little pop. I heard the Chipmunks sing Beat It before Michael Jackson, Express Yourself before Madonna, and I even managed to hear the Chipmunks cover of Achy Breaky Heart way more than the virtually inescapable Billy Ray Cyrus original. Also, and I'm sorry I have to remind y'all of this one, but do you remember Chipmunk Punk? Their 1980s comeback album that got a lot of attention when the creepy slowed down Sludge Fest remix was posted online? Sadly, not at all represented on the 35th anniversary compilation. I personally just love they had the nerve to call it punk considering the track list. Tom Petty, Billy Joel. Those rancid rodents cannot be trusted. They're a menace to society. Not even Sessions Records would stoop to that level of deception.
Tell them about punk.
Yeah, we got this CD called Punk. It's loaded with our favorite tunes, man.
Yeah.
Just listen.
I found a copy of Chipmunk Punk at a thrift store, so naturally I had to have it. It cost me $3, and I'd like to report a robbery. I don't even own a record player, but Chipmunk Punk is one of the 3 records I own, effectively making it 33 1/3% of my record collection, which, quite frankly, tracks. As much as I hate to admit it, they were a really big part of my earliest musical identity. And while we're on the subject of cornerstones of my childhood, it feels like a good time to bring up Weird Al Yankovic. But then again, there is no such thing as a bad time for Weird Al. I was trying to think back to where I first heard of Weird Al, and mysteriously, I couldn't remember. I may as well have seen him in a vision, playing an accordion on a flaming pie, but I do remember my first Weird Al CD was Bad Hair Day. Weird Al would become my latest obsession in my tween years, and it was my first concert. If you don't count the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles coming out of their shell tour when I was like 3? Weird Al fits into this conversation because his polka medleys were practically compilation commercials themselves. Short clips of related popular songs of the day, strung together in a tight, memorable package. Bad Hair Day's alternative polka single-handedly introduced me to grunge, punk, industrial, and alt-rock, which might also be hard to believe, but I was very much in my own musical bubble up until this point, where very little mainstream music ever broke through. Besides all my 80s compilations, to this point, most of my other CDs were cartoon soundtracks, stand-up comedy, or novelty records like Bob Rivers. So Weird Al was that Trojan horse, presenting popular music disguised as comedy. I can also credit Weird Al for introducing me to another band I would soon become obsessed with, Devo, and it wasn't with Dare to Be Stupid. I wouldn't see the music video for Dare to Be Stupid for a while, and the song itself didn't scream Devo to a kid who had no idea who Devo was, or may have only heard Whip It up until that point. It was actually Polkas on 45 from Weird Al in 3D that starts out by quoting the lines to Jocko Homo, one of Devo's earliest, most essential tracks. By not only saying but also spelling D-E-V-O in the lyrics, I was able to look up the band and their other songs with what limited internet skill I had by the late 90s. This was all still very new to me, but thankfully I found 30-second samples on Amazon, CD Now, and VH1's websites, which took forever with our dial-up internet connection, but this would be the first time I heard Devo's Beautiful World and the cover of the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction. But we'll talk more about Devo another day. Perhaps in another video. Equally as important to me as these not sold in stores compilations were, movie soundtracks made up a big percentage of my earliest CDs too. They weren't always tied to one specific genre, and can be a buffet of all types of stuff. Pop, rock, R&B, and more, all in one place. But sticking to my 80s roots, the 2-volume Wedding Singer soundtrack would eventually skip with how many times I'd spun them, specifically with a 3-hit combo in Volume 2 of A Flock of Seagulls, Space Age Love Song, the B-52's Private Idaho remix, and the Flying Lizards cover of Money. I was able to put a finger on what little corner of the 80s I could call my own, New Wave, a genre my parents never really embraced, and it would finally set me apart from their tastes. Before this, I'd often borrow my mom's copy of the Grease soundtrack, but soon I'd latch myself onto another Travolta vehicle, Saturday Night Fever. I think I may have heard in passing that the soundtrack was one of the best-selling albums of all time, probably on pop-up video or something, and had to have a copy of my own. Disco would join New Wave as genres my parents never really appreciated, despite having lived through the periods firsthand, but I couldn't get enough of them. So much, in fact, I'd confuse and possibly concern my folks by asking for pure disco for my birthday.
Get ready for pure disco.
I had all 3 pure disco CDs, but because I would usually seek out these compilations for only a handful of songs, I'd rarely listen to the other songs I didn't recognize. I had ABBA staring me straight in the face, but because I didn't love Dancing Queen, I ignored Gimme Gimme Gimme, A Man After Midnight on Volume 2, and Lay All Your Love on Me on Volume 3. Judge me not for the fool I was. These CDs have a ton of songs I love today but foolishly snubbed at the time, which isn't to say these CDs went ignored, I still played the hell out of them. When I sold off my original CD collection in like 2009, I brought them all down to a local music store, and when I handed them my copies of Pure Disco, the guy behind the counter taking the trade-ins took one look at them and was like, I don't know what to do with these, I don't know where I could put them. But knowing the layout of the store, and having seen the section with my own 2 eyes, I sarcastically said, well, don't you have a gay section? And the guy was like, oh yeah, and he entered them in the computer, and surprisingly, that store doesn't exist anymore. There was also Pure Funk. I didn't have this one, but the ending of the commercial always makes me laugh with the disco dancer screaming, trapped in this tiny box for all eternity.
Wait, or send check or money order.
The 80s and 90s commercials were considerably different because they actually have music videos for every song, but they didn't have the same luxury with the 50s, 60s, and 70s, so they ended up having to fill time with a bunch of B-roll of people dressed like hippies.
Hey, man, is that Freedom Rock? Yeah, man. Well, turn it up, man.
Crazy with a spooky little girl like you.
Greasers.
Where did it all go? Oh, my darling. Where? It's right here on the first authentic 1950s rock and roll collection. Boy, it's better than a set of hubcaps and a lot easier to get to.
Whatever the fuck is going on here.
The British invasion marched right in.
Shake it up, baby.
Shake it up, baby. That'll be the day.
1, 2, 3. Look at Mr. Lee.
One name I heard over and over going through these commercials was the 70s Preservation Society.
Got what?
Disco Fever! This great collection of my favorite dance songs from the 70s Preservation Society.
Now the greatest songs of the 1970s are finally here on Super 70s.
40 huge hits from the 70s Preservation Society.
And you get them all on Those Rockin' 70s, the ultimate collection of classic rock from the 70s Preservation Society.
Those funky 70s, the hot new song collection from your friends at the 70s Preservation Society.
Who in the 90s was afraid of the 70s being forgotten and thought we needed an official governing body dedicated to their preservation? Or at least the songs that the company had the rights to. Are they the people responsible for classic rock radio being like 90% songs from the 70s? Kayfabe aside, if we did have a 70s Preservation Society, I wouldn't be surprised if a one-hit wonder was behind it. Like Carl Douglas, Steeler's Wheel, or Looking Glass. Afraid we'd all forget about Brandy, the girl that was cucked by the ocean.
Jeremiah was a bullfrog, was a good friend of mine, blinded by the light.
Turns out that Suddenly 70s was the first major release from Razor and Tie, a label that would dominate the late 90s TV record market, and we'll get to some of their biggest titles a little later. I really wanted to share this commercial for Easy 70s with y'all because the acting and dialogue is baffling.
Hey, Denny, did I hear my favorite songs of all time coming from your apartment?
How would she know what your favorite songs were, creep? And even so, what of it? Do I know you?
Good ears, Dan. I just got Easy 70s, the perfect collection of mellow classics from the 70s Preservation Society.
Great taste.
I hate Dan's smile and condescending tone, like he's about to ask Debbie to name another Minnie Riperton song or she isn't a real fan. I get the sense one of these two is a serial killer, but I haven't yet decided who.
And Debbie, the pasta is good, but the music, you outdid yourself.
Oh, Dan, that was simple. Easy 70s is the greatest. It has 40 big hits and over 2 hours of the smoothest love songs ever.
While that might be true for a majority of the compilation, Debbie, Horse with No Name and especially Cats in the Cradle stick out like sore thumbs. I know you didn't compile these songs yourself, but don't cover for Razor and Ty's lazy attempt at padding.
Dinner at my place next Friday?
Great. Should I make my pasta?
That's okay. Just bring Easy 70s.
Damn, Debbie, you gonna let Dan diss your pasta like that? I say your pasta as if it wasn't just barilla and ragu. Dan can whip that shit up at home, but Debbie isn't about to burn him a copy of Easy 70s until at least the second or third date.
Let me borrow it. No, my brother. You've got to buy your own.
I started noticing kids at school singing songs of the day, and I was becoming increasingly interested in what all the hubbub was about. I couldn't deny it anymore, but I could try to fool myself first. Club Chipmunk, the dance mixes. The boys are back, now in tight black suits. Not only is this album incredibly pointless, but it's easily their most unsettling. Not like you're looking for reasons to ignore this album, but this is also the worst the Chipmunks have ever sounded. The Chipmunks Sing the Beatles hits was a cheap cash grab, I stand by that statement. But this has it beat. Besides the subpar production, even as far as the Chipmunks are concerned, this track list, woof. Their cover, or covers, of the Macarena are the only reasons this CD exists, and in a couple of decades, they would have just released it as a standalone single, but they had an album to fill. And how did they do it? Well, with disco, of course. It makes up about half the album. But I already know all these songs. But who the hell are these people? So what else? How about Love Shack? How about Alvin singing about wearing next to nothing and lovin' on a glitter-covered mattress? Somehow, still not convinced?
Don't hate me because I'm beautiful. Too sexy for Milan, New York and Japan. Dave's going to leave me.
Oh, fuck you! Fuck you, pal!
Well, there's no topping that, and it was time to face the music and graduate to the real McCoy. Pun intended. Bring on Ultimate Dance Party 1997. It's funny because when I originally asked my parents for this CD, the point wasn't so much about liking these songs as it was wanting to seem cool by knowing the songs and not feeling like so much of an outsider. But I did grow to appreciate most of the album over time. Now, I don't buy too many compilation CDs these days, but Ultimate Dance Party 97 is fairly essential. If you want a snapshot of what mid-90s Eurodance was like, you can't do much better than this baby. And seeing as how a lot of the bands on here are one-hit wonders, or a lot of their songs sound the same, this is probably the only shit you're gonna want of theirs. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna go out of my way to buy a LaBouche or Out There Brothers CD. I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me. I was very slow to accept pop music and admit I enjoyed it, but a very big, convenient doorway would open. Right about...
Are you ready for now? 17 of today's hottest superstars in one all-new Power Pack collection.
I cannot stress how important the Now series was. By the late 90s, there were already compilations of songs from earlier in the decade, but Now was revolutionary in that the albums had songs that were currently in the radio's heavy rotation. The series originated in the UK in 1983, but didn't make its debut in the US until 98. I knew a few of the rock songs on the first Now, which were the main reasons I got the CD in the first place, but they ended up opening the door to the pop stuff I would have been way too embarrassed to ask for on their own. Not in a million years would I have been able to ask for a Spice Girls or Britney Spears CD, but I could ask for Now because of the Harvey Danger, Fastball, and Everclear. It was all rooted in the preteen insecurity and anxiety of what music was, quote, for boys and for girls. I ended up owning the first 6 or 7 Now CDs, and they'd all have a small handful of rock songs at the very end, which would always be why I wanted the CD in the first place, but I would end up listening to the guilty pleasure pop hits at the beginning way more. But there were other compilations I hoped to broaden my musical palette with, and that's where Razor and Tie come in. Since most of the other companies had fallen off, if you saw a compilation commercial at this point, chances are it was Razor and Tie, including some 90s compilations acting as if there wasn't at least 3 years left in the decade.
That's why we got Living in the 90s. 2.5 hours of the coolest songs on 2 CDs and 2 cassettes.
Check it out!
Legendary artists. There's only one thing left to say about Living in the 90s.
You're unbelievable.
I had a few Razor and Tie collections myself. Kind of ashamed to admit it, so let's start with the least embarrassing one.
On the Edge, over 120 minutes of groundbreaking hits on 2 CDs and 2 cassettes.
I gotta say, as far as alternative rock goes, On the Edge had a pretty dope selection. But naturally, I didn't end up listening to most of the songs and missed out on some real gems. I could have got into They Might Be Giants at least 3 years earlier if I had noticed Birdhouse in Your Soul was on there. I had heard of them before from some of the songs featured on Tiny Toons, but didn't think to check them out until hearing Hey Mr. DJ, I Thought We Had a Deal when I was a DJ for our high school radio station. I remember really liking Rush by Big Audio Dynamite, Been Caught Stealin' by Jane's Addiction, and The Smiths' How Soon Is Now, a song I remembered from the Wedding Singer soundtrack. As far as the second Razor and Tie compilation, I should preface it by saying I originally wanted it as a joke.
Teen Riot. 35 heart-throbbing hits.
A friend and I had this running gag about the Cool It Now video from the commercial, so when I got it for Christmas one year, I called him up and I played it over the phone to practically no reaction, which is honestly not the worst way that could have played out. Teen Riot, released in 2000, was another one of those mostly 90s compilations, this time focusing on teen idols and boy bands. Since I already had a few Now albums under my belt by this point, I was already beginning to appreciate pop music and grew to enjoy a number of the songs, mainly Two of Hearts by Stacey Q, Only in My Dreams by Debbie Gibson, You Keep Me Hanging On by Kim Wilde, and another one, I forget what it was. But that same Christmas, I also got my third and final Razor and Tie album.
It's Monsters of Rap, the biggest hip-hop hits on 2 CDs and 2 cassettes.
Now don't get me wrong, I was not into rap as a kid. Whoomp There It Is was the first rap song I ever heard going all the way back to Jock Jams, and it took me quite a while to finally get into rap as a genre. And I don't think Monsters of Rap had a particularly big hand in that. This, again, if I had to guess, was me trying to broaden my horizons closer to what the kids at school were listening to. But like Teen Riot, most of these songs were either from the early 90s or late 80s. The kids at school were listening to Eminem, Jay-Z, and Puff Daddy, not Third Base, Rex and Effect, and Positive K.
Youngest to learning, I'm Big Daddy Long stroking your man's Pee Wee Herman.
Oh, so funny I forgot to laugh.
On the Edge and Teen Riot were solid compilations of the alternative rock and 90s pop genres, but Monsters of Rap, even across 2 CDs, does not even come close to being a great representation of the hip-hop genre up to that point. I would label it non-threatening rap music for white suburban kids, and I guess in that way it was a slam dunk for me. But it's also a total ripoff, recycling a handful of songs from Teen Riot to pad out the 2-disc set, including Ice Ice Baby, Bust a Move, and Rico fucking Suave. Now that's not to say there weren't good songs, there were. For every Cars with the Boom, you get Tennessee, Slam, The Choice Is Yours, and Scenario. Actually, the more I think about it, this album did make me more knowledgeable about rap than my peers. Who else in school knew who the hell Curtis Blow was? But a conversation about Razor and Tie, and monsters in general, would not be complete without... Now this is God tier, right up there with Pure Moods. Now there were a few reasons we remember this commercial so well. It was on all the damn time. The song transitions are iconic. And of course, the star of the show, the skydiving asshole, yelling,
It's Monsters of Rock!
Monsters of Rock. 35 huge hits on 2 CDs and 2 cassettes. Featuring Warren.
Rush delivery available!
That's how they were delivering CDs? Razor and Tie had money like that? Damn, suddenly 70s was going crazy! Monsters of Rock is possibly the best known collection of hair and glam metal with hits from Poison, Great White, Cinderella, and Whitesnake. But this compilation isn't without its padding. Possibly knowing they'd be making sequel compilations, they couldn't exhaust the catalog of songs they owned the rights to this quickly. Throw Scandal on there. How about Asia, Nelson, and my boys Cutting Crew? Knowing they had a hit on their hands, the following year, we were shown the more sensitive, vulnerable side of the genre.
They taught us how to love. They taught us how to live.
Every bad boy has his soft side, or so I'm told, and with Monster Ballads, we got a whole new batch of awesome song transitions, and now there's a skydiving bride and groom.
It's awesome!
If y'all say so, many happy returns. I don't think I need to say it, but I wasn't interested in any of these CDs. 80s hair metal was never my shit, but I love these commercials, and there's one more, often forgotten compilation that never gets the same love as the other two.
Be afraid.
I honestly forgot this one existed before I was compiling commercials for this video, and I really don't remember much about this commercial, besides the goofy face CeCe DeVille is making here, looking like a little kid coughing with her tongue out. But you can see the budget for this one right away. 4 skydiving assholes?
The rules. It rocks!
Wow. And now they're delivering the CDs directly to the folks on the road? Now that's the kind of top-notch, death-defying service I've come to know from Razor and Tie. Is what I would be saying if they were paying me any of that sweet, sweet Suddenly 70s money. Essentially, it's just a collection of second songs from bands already featured on Monsters of Rock. It ticks all the boxes. Poison, Quiet Riot, Slaughter,
Twisted Sister.
the gang's all here, and just like the Monsters of Rap, Razor and Tie released a Platinum Edition, taking hits from all 3 previous Monsters of Rock installments and adding a few extra as a big middle finger to anyone who bought the older ones. They could have released an all-new 4th compilation, but Razor and Tie was cheapening out. There aren't even any skydivers in this episode. They knew this was bullshit, why bother hiding it? And there were plenty of other Razor and Tie collections I remember from this time, like The Buzz, Fired Up, and Goin' South, which also had a Platinum Edition and apparently came with a free poster. Damn, dude, in the 2000 economy? But even with the introduction of peer-to-peer services, Razor and Tie were pumping out largely ignored compilations into the mid-2000s and beyond, with Hits 2000.
The best are all in one place. It's Hits 2000, the 30 biggest hits of a new millennium on 2 awesome CDs.
And Over the Edge, released in 2008.
It's time to take it further. Brace yourself, because we're about to go Over the Edge. The brand new 3 CD set complete with 50 huge hits for only $28.99.
Razor and Tie is still around to this day with their own roster of signed talent, having left the compilation albums game some time ago. One such act, signed to the label, is Kidzbop. You might have heard about them. They've been shitting out content since the turn of the millennium, but we'll talk more about Kidzbop another day. Perhaps in another video. The last compilations I remember getting were the Modern Rock collection from our old friends at Time Life. By late 2000, Devo had firmly cemented their spot as my new favorite band, and I was looking for more quirky new wave hits that scratched the same itch, and Modern Rock was chock full of the stuff. The commercial for Modern Rock is also fondly remembered for this ingenious transition, possibly the best of all time.
Don't turn around,
The series also introduced me to another one of my future obsessions, Frank Zappa. Perhaps not the best introduction?
Like, I go to this, like, salon place, you know, and I want, like, to get my toenails done, and the lady, like, goes, oh my god, your toenails are, like, so grody.
But there were a bunch of hits on here that I remember seeing in VH1 countdowns over the years, and was happy to finally have my hands on them. In about a year, however, everything would change. For one, I downloaded Napster. But between the computer being in the living room and the dial-up internet connection made for some dreadfully long download times, I didn't use it very much. Mainly just trying to find Devo songs I couldn't find on CDs and burning my own copies. I was also becoming more adventurous checking out more of my dad's CDs, classic rock artists like Led Zeppelin, Talking Heads, and David Bowie just to name a few. My dad also deserves a lot of credit for being in tune with what was popular in the early 90s, having copies of Pearl Jam's 10, Nirvana's entire discography, Green Day's Dookie and Insomniac, Soundgarden, and others. We would get a copy of The Offspring's Americana in early 2001, and the band would be my foot in the door for current day pop punk, and I snatched up their previous records not soon after. In the summer of 2001, my family moved from New Jersey to North Carolina, and I was about to start high school. And as corny as it sounds, compilation albums were a source of comfort throughout it all. For one, I remember listening to Teen Riot and Now 6, specifically Yellow from Coldplay, waiting in the airport to board the plane. And once we were finally settled in our new house, the commercial for Easy Rock, a yacht rock compilation, played seemingly every half hour. And while it did become a running joke in the house, it also struck a nostalgic chord and helped make the environment feel a little more familiar. You hear people talk about songs that remind them of movies they were in, like Layla in Goodfellas or Yellow's Oh Yeah in Ferris Bueller. That's how this commercial works for me. I hear This Is It, I think of Kenny Loggins running out of frame, Baby What a Big Surprise, The Creepy as Hell Hot Child in the City. I hear any of these, I'm thinking of those orange and blue banners. The end transition alone, between Reminiscing and Kiss You All Over, chef's kiss you all over.
It feels so right.
The move was a big shift, but just as monumental was that the computer was now in my room. This new sense of freedom, combined with newer file-sharing programs like LimeWire and Kazaa, meant I could download virtually any song I wanted and bricked only 2 or 3 hard drives along the way. The scenery wasn't the only thing that changed, but by now, I was watching MTV2 and VH1 Classic regularly and was listening to the radio a lot more than I ever did in New Jersey. For my first birthday after the move, all my gifts were CDs and not a single compilation to be found. This included Herbie Hancock's Future Shock, Californication, and audio by the Blue Man Group. I used to own a Blue Man Group CD.
I wouldn't go around telling people that.
From here, the only CD mixtapes I dealt with were ones I burnt myself, and that wouldn't last much longer either, but the story does pick up a few years later. I landed a part-time job at Circus City in 2004, a year away from graduating high school, buying CDs with my minuscule employee discount while downloading tons more from Blogspot pages. I was finally getting into hip-hop, though still mostly old-school artists for now. I was stumbling across all these different indie bands I'd never heard of, but still love to this day. Though it's not nearly the player in the music streaming game as it once was, Pandora helped me find bands based on ones I already knew I liked. Fast forward to Black Friday 2006. After playing the game we had on display in my downtime at work, I picked up Guitar Hero 2 on my lunch break. Between Guitar Hero and Rock Band, I was introduced to a bunch of bands I would eventually become a fan of. Playing YYZ got me into Rush, and playing The Trees made me question that decision. I remember there being a backlash from gatekeepers who looked down on people, like me, who discovered bands this way, and that never made sense to me. With that logic, you could justify all sorts of elitist, self-congratulatory bullshit. Discovering music you enjoy is always a great feeling. You mean this music has existed for years and I'm only just now learning about it? That's an incredible feeling, and almost always leads to discovering other bands and opening other doors. It doesn't make you any better or worse than someone else who took a different road to get to the same destination. At the time of this recording, a 37-year-old Kate Bush song is on the charts thanks to it being featured in Stranger Things. And before that, it was a popular sound on TikTok about a year ago. Despite its many shortcomings as a platform, I love that any song from anywhere or any time has a chance of becoming a popular sound on TikTok. When I first joined, a huge trend was Zanzibar by Billy Joel. Nightcore, Europop, disco, new wave, and just about anything outside mainstream pop has as big of a chance at trending as the newest single in the Billboard Top 10. The fact that a song by King Khan and the Barbecue Show is one of the most popular sounds on TikTok right now blows my mind. Multiple Louis Prima songs have been huge trends. These songs would never get radio play today, but thanks to TikTok, they're being heard, possibly for the first time, by millions of users, young and old, and I think that's beautiful. Music is for everyone, and it's always there for you. In good times and bad, it doesn't judge you. Music is everywhere, and it's up to you to find it. So like what you like, and screw whatever anyone else has to say about it. Except for, like, Like Nazi metal? Don't listen to Nazi metal. There's no excuse for that.